I saw in here page 2 of the matrix, and it has abandoned sign. And I guess that's a big, broad door opening, because we can get into the yard sale signs, garage sale signs, and everything else. And I guess that's kind of been one of my pet peeves over the years, is we end up with all kinds of signage, and I'd like to at least see how you guys discuss that part of it. But, and I know we're not talking about yard sale signs, but when you talk about an abandoned sign, what kind of teeth did you put into this thing, and how do you follow up with it?
Well, we had two sections. We had abandoned signs, and then we had removal of signs, a requirement. And the definition of abandoned sign says it has to be, it's gone for a year. And so then the removal of signs is basically 30 days after that. So you have 1 year, 30 days. If that nothing happens, then that sign and structure, supports, everything are supposed to go. After the first 30 days is where the copies change is supposed to come down. If the business goes out of business, then the copy should come down off the sign so no one's driving and seeing something that's not there. But then if it sits in for that year, that's when it's considered by our definition, an abandoned sign, and everything before it needs to come down.
If you have multiple violations by an individual, when they come back in to redo for a sign, do you have any past reference to they didn't comply?
Well, that's the thing. If it's past that year and they haven't complied, and assuming that, let's say that sign is not in compliance with the code that we have in effect, then they can't redo that sign. That sign would basically then have to come down and comply, or be modified in some way to comply with the current code. If it's within that year time period, then they can come back in and just put their copy back up on the sign, so they're not, given another fee there.
And the teeth for getting the sign down, or making sure that it's down, or?
That's a function of code enforcement, which we have right now. If we notice the business is out, then we just have to monitor it.
I would like, if I could, Mr. Mayor, to get a total cost of how much it costs the city to implement this sign, or the sign code. How much does it cost us in code enforcement? How much does it cost us in administrative work, manpower? I'd like to know, to get a dollar figure of how much this is actually costing the city to have this kind of code in place. To
I'm
me,
pretty sure we can get that estimate, but the cost is going to be the same as any other code or regulation and enforcement of any of the other codes in the city.
okay. Then I'd also like, too, what kind of cost benefit do we get in comparison, as far as, we have the sign permits, the sign review, the sign, how much money we bring in from code enforcement, and I'd like to see that side by side as well. That would really be good.
But where are you going with this? I mean, are you trying to say, is it worth our time to even have an ordinance in place, or would you just let every sign go up that wants to go up? And I'm just.
Well, I think if I were doing this code myself, if I were on the planning commission, I think that, to me, looking through this, it looks like a quilt that's just got a bunch of patchwork done to it. And I would almost would have encouraged the planning commission to basically strike everything and start from scratch and work backwards. Because there seems to be a lot of things in here that just are really unenforceable. And I didn't see any discussion on also repealing our ban on billboards within the city as well, which is something that I personally like to see. One of the things that is very important to business when you're talking about signage, it costs us, say, $115 to run a very small ad in the Post-Record. For a sign I can buy for $115 that'll last me for 365 days a year. When I'm looking from a business standpoint, these little signs are cost effective versus one hit where I spend $115 on an ad in the paper and it's gone the next week. For us, looking at it from a business standpoint, we look at these signs as a way for us to get our message out at a more cost-effective rate. And if I had access to a billboard, that would be even better. There's one billboard in town, but what if there are businesses that have space on the side of their buildings to place a billboard that's not in the way? There's discussions along that way, you know, it's also more revenue into the city. You know, billboards create jobs. So that's another thing to look at as well.
Well, you know, Councilmember Russell, I was not aware that council had the desire to look at reinstating billboards. So that subject never came up.
Yeah.
I never received that direction from either administration or the council. So,
And
can I just say too that the information that you want may take longer
Sure.
to get you, and so if it will impact your decision, or I think that we should hold the public hearing to get public testimony, but take that action.
Yeah. And you just think that's important component to this, is that aspect of how much is it costing the city for us to have this kind of a sign code, or, you know, even with these small changes, is it gonna be comparable and still be in the same price range? You know, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any restrictions, obviously there should be, to protect people from signs that fall over on them or in the way. You got a little selling for me to do in regards to visual clutter. You know, that's not something that I really into and worried about. But it's more the, you know, the safety aspect I would be concerned about.
just what you know is that our code does still, I mean, we do have provisions for billboards. It's
Mhm.
not that we wouldn't have to repeal, that we repeal them, if we just allow them in such a limited area right now.
Right.
And so basically, we have provisions in the code for billboards that would, if the council chooses then to look at expanding that area.
Right. Just East Street's the only,
Yeah.
right.
If you turn over the basic document, the agenda item, about halfway down on the back side of that page, it says uncontrolled and unlimited signs may degrade the aesthetic attractiveness of the community, which would undermine the economic value of tourism, education, and economic growth. And I guess my question is, how did you come to that conclusion?
That's actually
Because the whole
council's
thing
conclusion.
seems to be based on that conclusion.
It's actually within existing code that it was one of the purposes and one of the findings of the council that adopted the sign code originally. They determined that.
And visual aesthetics is also part of RCWs as well. It's in our, we have the ability to make restrictions based on that.
Can you help me define the code that applies to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first section, I believe.
It's the purpose statement, page 1, 1860-005.
I'm sorry, 1860?
It's in your packet.
Actually,
It's page 1 of the code.
if you look at page 1, exhibit 8.
A double underlined is language that was taken from somewhere else in the code and just placed here. The stricken is what planning commission is proposing to strike. Single underlined would be new language. As you can see, that all that language is in the existing code.
I must be looking at the wrong document here.
Exhibit A,
Exhibit A.
About the fifth page back, Dave.
Sure, I've got
purpose.
that. Okay. There's a complete one.